at the developers conference. For reaction to that and the other key announcements made today, let's bring back in star Wedbush analyst Dan Ives. Thanks for being back with us. You said going in that this was one of the most important moments in the history of this company, perhaps one of the top 3 moments. Did it live up to the hype?
I think it was a home run. I mean, ultimately, they delivered on every item that they needed to in terms of OpenAI, in terms of the privacy. And really, essentially what they're doing is they're laying out the stack for developers. The only way that they're going to tap into that data is going through Apple. So to me, this is the start of what's going to be an AI-driven, I think, super cycle from 16 to 17. And most importantly, Scott, it's services. I think this is going to be really a game changer from a services perspective.
You call it that it changed. By the way, here's the note. I mean, you published literally a new note before you sat down
5 minutes
with us. So maybe a lot of it was locked and loaded and ready to go. You call it a game changer. You say that the company is not getting any credit for its AI monetization. Isn't that rightfully so? Isn't this a bit of a show-me story at this point?
Oh, no. And look, but Apple's been there before from a show-me perspective. But if you look, you have 270 million. I think this is the most important thing. 270 million of 1.5 billion iPhones have not upgraded in 4+ years. Pent-up demand's there. And now they're laying the yellow brick road to monetization for AI. Now, look, we could talk about Godfather of AI, Jensen, NVIDIA, Nadella, and Microsoft, and everything that we see in this 1995 AI moment. But from a consumer perspective, 25% of the world, in our opinion, when they access AI, it's going to be through an Apple device.
Let me ask you this.
Apple just wrapped up their Worldwide Developers Conference keynote and unveiled a slew of exciting innovations that will take their devices to the next level. During the highly anticipated keynote, Apple gave us a sneak peek into the new AI capabilities and substantial software upgrades coming soon to iPhones, iPads, Macs, and beyond. Were you on the edge of your seat watching live, or did you miss out on all the big reveals? No worries, we've rounded up all the need-to-know announcements for you right here in today's video. Additionally, we'll talk about whether investors should go all in on Apple stock after this impressive event. So, don't miss out. But before we get into today's video, if you want to keep up with Apple's latest updates and keep up with the stock market's latest news, you can follow our Twitter account. We post multiple times daily about the biggest changes and catalysts in the market, so click the follow button if you don't want to miss the newest market updates. Now, back to today's video.
Why has the upgrade cycle been so slow? You highlight what you call pent-up demand. We could have said perhaps a year ago, there's pent-up demand. The new phone did not lead to a tremendous super cycle, as you suggested. Why?
The products are too good. I mean, the battery technology has just gotten better. If you look at, especially in China, you really haven't seen many upgrades there for the last 2-3 years. And from a hardware perspective, the innovations really haven't been there. That's been that catalyst. But now the catalysts are really going to be on the software. It's going to be on the chip. It's going to be on the LLM. And essentially what Cook here did is say, this is our castle. This is the Apple castle. The data's not leaving. If you're a developer, you want access to it, you got to come to Cupertino and Apple Park. If not, you're not going to be there. And that's why, and there's 2.2 billion reasons, iOS devices, why I believe this is so important.
Why do you think the stock is doing what it's doing today? And is it as simple as saying, well, it ran up into the announcement? But I want to hear it in your own words as to why you think whatever the stock performance reflects, if anything, in one moment doesn't make a full story for sure. But there's not a flying off the chart move today in the stock to suggest perhaps the optimism that you articulate in your seat.
Because I think the knee-jerk, there was no wow in itself in terms of an actual use case that they talked about that I think the average investor looked at.
I mean, you just painted a whole wow thing but now you say there was no wow.
I'm saying wow individually. I think when you look overall to presentation, I actually thought it was ahead of expectations relative to what they laid out. And I think a lot of times with Apple events, look, I remember, Scott, iPhone 6. I mean, I could go through many events. You came out here being like, wow, investors are not, they're disappointed. And then all of a sudden, you had a $500 billion go to a $3 trillion. So I do think in the Apple story, investors are glass half empty. But I believe we sit here 6 to 12 months from now, this will be a historical moment for Apple.
Wedbush Securities' Dan Ives is extremely bullish on Apple, and who can blame him? The new event sent the stock higher and allowed Apple to briefly take back its spot as the second most valuable company in the world from NVIDIA. The most important announcement was definitely the company's first ever AI system, Apple Intelligence. This system is Apple's new personal intelligence system that puts powerful generative models right at the core of your iPhone, iPad, and Mac. That enables a ton of new capabilities across Apple's native apps, like the ability to generate images or summarize text. Additionally, Apple Intelligence comes with a big emphasis on security, as the system will automatically decide whether it needs to use on-device processing or contact Apple's private cloud computing server to fulfill your request. Notably, the system will be available for free and on the iPhone 15 Pro, as well as on iPads and Macs with an M1 chip and later. Apple's big push into AI also includes Siri, as the company also upgraded its voice assistant. Siri will now be integrated more deeply into the iPhone, appearing as a pulsating light on the edge of the device. It will also give iPhone users more control over apps, allowing them to ask the voice assistant to find information inside a particular email, or even surface a photo of a particular person from the phone's gallery. And Apple will make this possible by relying on large language models to help Siri better understand what people say and keep track of follow-up requests and questions. There are many other great announcements that Apple made, including the company's partnership with OpenAI. So let's take a look at what it's all about. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Investocracy.
Dan, we talked a little bit earlier about some of the features that Apple announced. Specifically, talk to us a little more about that partnership with OpenAI and the implications of it and kind of how it's going to work.
Yeah, so really what they're doing is they're going to be integrating GPT technology, OpenAI technology, into iOS. So you'll be able to do things like pull up Siri, ask for a question. You could choose if you want to have GPT answer or Siri answer. Now, Apple says that all the information, your data, all of that is going to not go up to OpenAI. It's not going to be shared. It's not going to be used to train anything. And that really is something that's important. We saw Sam Altman wandering around ahead of the event. They didn't make too much fanfare of the announcement. It was relatively small when you take into the totality of what Apple announced here. But, the Apple Intelligence platform is seemingly a kind of new way for Apple to move forward, because it's going to be across all of these different platforms, with this iPhone, iPad, Mac. Didn't say anything about Vision Pro yet, or watchOS, or Apple TV. But the fact that it's going to be on iPhone, on iPad, and on Mac, and talking across those is really important. And I think when you look at the companies that are offering consumer level AI, that's Microsoft, Apple, and Google, Apple seems to have really started to come out on its own ahead of the other two. Now, that being said, they were only just announced. We haven't used it yet. We haven't seen what kind of hiccups there might be. Google and Microsoft did announce their own AI products, and they had hiccups. In fact, Microsoft just had to pull back its recall feature, an AI-driven feature, before they even released it because of some backlash about potential security issues. So this is a big move for Apple. They're going to have to be essentially testing it. They're going to roll out the beta, the private beta, and then the public beta, and then we'll see what kind of reactions users give towards that. But it's interesting because they're also not just doing this using Apple software. They're also opening it up to third-party software. So you'll be able to do things like ask your phone to take advantage of certain app features or pull up information from certain apps. So it really is kind of an all-in approach for Apple here. And for a company that, Wall Street's been waiting for 2 years to see what they were going to do with generative AI, it really seems as though they've delivered on what was expected, but nothing over and beyond that.
And Dan, I'm interested too. One theme today was privacy. Apple really emphasizing that. Not surprising that that's a core value in Cupertino. I'm curious to get your take, Dan, on how much you think that resonates with consumers, how much that matters with consumers.
I think for most people, that's a big selling point for Apple. They push security as a selling point and privacy as a selling point for themselves all the time. And I think that for the average consumer, when they think of generative AI, there's questions as to whether or not their data is going to be used to train models or be sent back to some large server where it's held onto indefinitely. Apple making sure to say, look, We're going to send the bare minimum amount of data. It's going to go to special Apple servers running on Apple Silicon with all the kind of privacy you would expect, and then it's not going to be stored there. So that's an important differentiator for Apple that they're trying to use. I think one of the other important differentiators to point out, and one of the things that they try to lay out at the top, is that this is all going to be context sensitive to your information. Now, rather than a broad-based kind of GPT or Microsoft, Google, this is all going to be based on your data. So when you pull stuff up on your phone, you're going to be looking for information from your apps. I used an example earlier about if you have to pick someone at the airport, you could say, should I leave for the airport? Well, what time do I have to pick up mom or whatever? And it'll look through your content and tell you exactly what you need to know. And I think that's a key differentiator for Apple here. They're making it about security, as you point out, and then about the context sensitivity here. That's something that I think is really important and could be a major selling point for Apple, just making things a lot easier for consumers overall.
Dan, finally, I want to ask you, I mean, you're immersed in tech. You use it a lot in your daily life. What was the feature today that most wowed you that they introduced?
Honestly, I think for myself, we want to see how this whole context sensitivity thing works, right? I mean, cool. I can rearrange the apps on my iPhone screen. All right, that's fun. The Genmoji, the generative AI memojis. All right, that's cool. You know, people like that. My brother loves it. But for me, it's going to be about how does this now pull information that I need up, like surfaces it properly for me. I think, you know, for generative AI for consumers, this is probably the way to go. Being able to edit my photos is fun and all. Being able to, you know, edit some audio, great, fun, interesting ways to use this. But the context sensitivity, pulling up content that I need, summarizing things for me in an easy to understand way. The notifications feature that they announced, the sensitivity for notifications that you want. So I don't need to know that the Mets lost again before I get a text message from my wife. It'll stack them the right way. The more important one, my wife. The less important one, the Mets lost. Now, if the Mets win, they're more important, but they're not, so whatever. But I think that's something that is very important and something that I think overall is going to be a selling point, not just for me, but for most people. We just have to see if they can deliver exactly what they promised. And for Gen AI, it can be hit or miss so far.
Yes, most definitely. Utility and execution. Those are going to be the two really determining factors here. Dan, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
More of Apple's new features include the ability to use AI to summarize emails and generate responses, generate custom emojis based on a text prompt, and a new AI image generator called Image Playground. Additionally, Apple is adding AI-powered transcriptions and summaries to notes and the phone apps. But aside from all the AI, Apple is introducing a new and more customizable control center in iOS 18, and will also let you lock certain apps with the coming update, preventing other people from using them when you hand them your phone. In addition to that, Apple confirmed that RCS support is arriving with iOS 18, but it didn't expand on any other details beyond that though. iMessage is getting some other upgrades, including the ability to schedule texts and support for SMS messaging via satellite. Last week, there were some rumors floating around about Apple launching a passwords app, and they turned out to be true, as the company showcased a new passwords app that will let you keep track of your login details across different devices. What's even better is that the app will let you generate and store passwords. So these are the main AI announcements from Apple's recent keynote. But do they mean that investors should now invest in the company? Let's hear from top analysts and discuss the bull case for Apple to find out. But first, if you made it this far into the video, thank you. These videos take a lot of effort and time to make, so if you enjoyed them, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. This goes a long way in helping us grow. That said, back to the video.
Well, when do we start to get the first indications of what this really is going to mean? Do we have to wait until deep into the fall, the early winter, right? That a lot of this is not even going to be available for upgrade until the fall.
Yeah, I think it starts with Asia checks, you know, that us and others do. Do you start to see tick-ups coming from the Asia supply chain, 3-5% type growth for iPhone 16? Then you start to layer on an upgrade cycle. That's really important, because that's ultimately what Apple sees from a demand perspective. But I think it all comes down to China. I mean, China, we believe June's last negative growth quarter, This will be a catalyst. And the biggest issue with AI is about privacy. And this is really a flex the muscles for Cook, and I think lay it out perfectly. I also think OpenAI, it's a get out the popcorn moment. There's going to be a lot more with Altman being here that we're going to see around OpenAI and Apple.
I thought the demos that they showed, again, it was expected, but for the average person, this is must have. If you don't have AI powered, if Apple didn't do this, they would be totally out of luck over the long term. They did it, and I think that this will ultimately, the punchline here is they're going to grow next year faster than the street thinks. The street's looking for 6% growth. I bet it's going to be 10% plus.
Next year, meaning for full year, for
25.
fiscal year 2025.
Yeah, it's going to take time.
Correct?
I agree with Dan. I think Dan was talking about it's going to take time for this to build momentum. It's going to, this won't happen overnight, but this is a big deal. If you don't have these features, it's the fabric that's going to run the devices. If you don't have it, you're going to feel like you're on a flip phone.
So, Gene, when you think about sort of how this is monetizable, is it initially mostly going to be on the hardware side? In other words, when you're upgrading your iPhone, you're thinking about getting the more expensive version as opposed to the less expensive version, and eventually it turns into a services stream?
I think that's right. The first chapter, and I put that chapter over the next 1 to 3 years, is going to be this slow rising tide of upgrade. iPhone returning to 5%, 7% growth. I think the second phase is probably some specific services that they'll have around kind of higher feature AI. They didn't talk about agentic AI, agent AI. This is basically the ability, we've talked about this in the past, of AI actually doing tasks for you. Complicated, multi-layered tasks, contacting people, organizing things. That's a big opportunity longer term. But you are correct, Melissa. This is about getting people to recognize that their current phone isn't nearly good enough. And I think that they hit it. This is the biggest day for Apple since the iPhone, full stop.
Dan Ives is well known for his bullish views on Apple, and his $275 price target proves that, as it implies an upside of around 40%. Additionally, Gene Munster from Deepwater Asset Management thinks that Apple will see stronger growth than Nvidia next year. But is Apple stock a buy now? Apple investors endured a difficult time in the first 4 months of 2024 as shares of the tech giant fell 8%, while the Nasdaq 100 Technology Sector Index gained 6% over the same time. The company's stagnant growth and a lawsuit from the U.S. Department of Justice explain why investor confidence in Apple stock was low during this time. The good news is that the company might receive some love thanks to its new AI announcements. And if you take a look at the company's financials, you'd see that Apple's revenue in the second quarter of fiscal 2024 was down 4% from the year-ago period to $90.8 billion, driven mainly by a drop in iPhone sales. However, Apple beat Wall Street's expectations of $1.50 per share in earnings on $90 billion in revenue. What's more, the company expects to return to growth in the current quarter, with its revenue forecasted to increase in the low single digits on a year-over-year basis. Apple is forecasting double-digit growth in the services business and iPad revenue. Also, the global smartphone market reported 7.8% year-over-year growth in the first quarter of 2024, following a 3% decline last year, according to IDC. The market research firm is forecasting a 2.8% increase in smartphone sales this year, but there is a good chance the market could clock stronger growth thanks to AI-enabled smartphones. IDC estimates that 170 million AI smartphones could be shipped in 2024, accounting for 15% of the overall market. According to Counterpoint Research, that number is expected to head higher impressively in the future, with shipments forecasted to jump 4 times in the next 4 years. More importantly, Counterpoint is expecting Apple to become the leading player in the AI smartphone market in 2025. For these reasons, investors should consider buying Apple stock, as it could potentially soar in the future thanks to the rapidly growing AI smartphones market. But what do you think about Apple stock? Is it a buy at the current price? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section, and don't forget to tell us what your valuation for Apple is. If you would like to know what companies like Apple have been up to these past few days, go ahead and click on the next video on your screen. See you there.